Welcome back. We are going to see concept of power in political science. In this lecture, we are going to see concept of power in political science. Right? In debate of which concept form the core of political science, people will talk about justice. People will talk about state. Right? And some people will talk about power. Right? People like people like people like Lascelles, right? People like Lascelles has defined political science as people like Lascelles has defined political science as study of shaping PS political sciences, study of shaping and sharing of power, right? Political science as study of shaping and sharing of power, right? This quote exemplifies the centrality of concept of power to political science, right? And you see people like Machiavelli talk about power. Machiavelli talks about hard power and soft power. Then you see Hannah Arendt talking about power. You have seen people like Giovanni Gentile talking about power in fascism, right? Then we have seen people like Marx and Lenin talking about power. Recently, we have seen Foucault, and he gives his sociological account of power, right? Then we have seen people from feminism, radical feminist talk about power, right? Whereby they will say patriarchy and patriarchal basic structure as power. So power we have seen across different point of views. It is just that we are going to see it in more consolidated way right now, right? This is going to be the agenda of this lecture. As every concept of political science, as every concept of political science, there is a debate on power. There is a debate on what is power, how is power, how power is used, what strategies we will use to use power, what is purpose of power. So political every concept of political science is debated, every concept is contested, right? But in general, how power is defined is like this, right? Power is defined as power is production of intended effects, right? Bernard Russell has said this, right? Then Robert Dahl has said power is kind of influence which is exercised upon other to ensure their compliance. Power, influence, and compliance. This is Robert Dahl. This is the centrality of power, right? Andrew Haywood also talks about power in his book Political Theory, whereby he says that all and everything that is political science is about power, right? Now will decode decode power. Now we will uh, make a post-mortem of power and understand what is power, and starting with the question of who has power. Who has power, right? Now the first people to talk about who has power is humanist humanists, right? Humanist will say two things, that Power lies either with individual or with collective, right? Who has said power lies with individual? It is Robert Dahl. We are going to understand Robert Dahl and his view on power in more detail in concept of democracy and his elite theory of power, right? Then then humanist will say who has power? It is collective, right? Hannah Arendt says this. Hannah Arendt says this, whereby she says that power is sui generis. Power is unique. Sui generis means unique. Power is unique. Power is sui generis. When people act in concert, power power appears automatically. People acting in concert, power appears. When people stop acting in concert, power dissipates at that very moment. So, for humanists, power will lie with either individual, as Robert Dahl says it, or either with collective, as Hannah Arendt says this. And she says that power is unique in the sense that it lies with the collective. When collective acts in concert, power appears. When collective stops acting in concert, power dissipates. And the foremost example of power coming to the fore when people are acting in concert is Gandhian movement, right? Gandhian movements. Then you can see movements of you can see recent movements of Nepal, Gen Z protests. You can see protest happening in Indonesia. All these protests, in all these protests, you will see power coming together with very much ease when people are acting together and dissipating at the very moment when people stop acting in concert. This is the first view on who has power. Humanist will say power lies with individual or collective. Robert Dahl will say that power lies with individual. People like Hannah Arendt and Gandhi will say power lies with collective. Right? Then we understand structuralist theory. Right? What will structuralist will say about power? Right? Structuralist will say that structure has power. Structure has power. Why structure has power? Because structure constrain your choices. Structure constrains your choices. Right? This is structuralist view on power, whereby structure has power because structure constrain choices. How? Right? The first example will be Marxist theory. What will Marxists say? Right? The first Marxist that talked about power was undoubtedly Marx. Right? What Marx say? Marx say that there is a basic structure and superstructure is reflection of it. This is superstructure. One who controls basic structure has power. Right? One who controls basic structure has power. This is Marx. Then we see people like Lukács and Gramsci talk about power. Lukács and Gramsci talks about power, whereby they will say both superstructure and basic structure has power, and the influence is bidirectional. And the influence is bidirectional. Basic structure influence power, and superstructure influence basic structure as well, right? But they will agree on the view that one who control any of the structure has power, right? Again, very structuralist point of view, right? Very structuralist point of view, whereby if you control a structure, you have power. If you even if you control superstructure, you have power, right? What is power? It is influence. If you have influence, you have power. This is what power in essence is, right? And the classes for Gramsci, what is civil society? What is superstructure? It is basically civil society. What is basic structure? It is capitalist. So, capitalist and civil society are dominant class, and they will control or they will have power. So, if you control a structure, you have power. This is Lukács and Gramsci's view on power, right? We are seeing who has power. We have seen humanist point of view on who has power. We have seen structuralist point of view on who has power, whereby we are seeing Marxist idea, whereby Marx will say basic structure has power. One who controls basic structure will have power. Lukács and Gramsci, on the other hand, will say if you control any of the structure, by virtue of that you have power. By virtue of being a dominant class, you have power, right? The second structuralist theory is, right? First idea is humanist theory. Second idea is structuralist theory. In structuralist theory, second idea on who has power, which structure has power, was given by feminists, right? In particular, radical feminists, right? For feminist, what do you think is basic structure of society? Basic structure of society is patriarchy in form of heterogeneous families, right? So power will lie with patriarchy and heterogeneous society, and power will lie with what is male. Power will lie with male, right? And feminists will say power lies with patriarchy, which is the basic structure of the society according to feminists, right? Why feminists are categorized in structuralist theory? Because they say that patriarchy and heterogeneous families form basic structure of society, and in patriarchy or heterogeneous family, they place position of power, and they will say male has power in a society, right? We have seen who has power. In discussion of power, we have seen who has power. The next question, the next natural question that comes to your mind, my mind, everyone's mind, is that what is source of power? What is source of power, right? In this in this in this we'll see three sources of power. Liberals have one view, Marxists have another view, and then we will see people like Ramsey, Althusser, and Foucault who will say idea is a source of power, right? So I'll start with liberal view on source of power. What is liberal view on source of power will be, right? What is liberalism? Liberalism is basically constitutionalism. Constitution, which is product of contract, right? Constitution and the laws. Why liberal say constitution and the laws are source of power? Because constitution or laws are what? They are source of contract. We have seen people like Locke talking about contract. We have seen Rousseau's social contract, right? Hannah Arendt also talks about civic republicanism. and she also talks about contract in some capacity, right? Source of contract. What is contract? Contract is between all with all, right? What is contract? Social contract is a contract of all with all, right? For which Rousseau will say general will, right? This general will or popular sovereignty forms basis of power for liberals. So for liberals, what is source of power? Constitution. What constitution is made by what? It is a product of contract. Constitution is a product of contract. As constitution is a product of contract. And what is contract? Social contract is contract of all with all. That is basically general will or popular sovereignty. So in liberal view, what is source of power? They are people. In liberal view, people are source of power. People are source of power. Again, I have explained it. I will explain it one more time, right? With a flowchart. People when making contract with all, right? If people are making contract of all with all, it is known as social contract. This social contract will lead to formation of constitution, and on this constitution state will run, right? State will get power, right? So by causation, people are effectively source of power which state has, right? This theory was talked about and expanded by people like Rousseau, by people like Hannah Arendt. Rousseau and Hannah Arendt are both scholars of general will. They will both talk about civic republicanism. They will both talk about deliberative democracy, right? In civic republicanism or deliberative democracy, who are source of power? It is people. How people are source of power? Because people will make contract between them, and on basis of that contract, state will be formed. On basis of that contract, constitution will be formed, and on basis of that constitution, state will be formed. So this is liberal view on source of power, and this is also known as contractual view of power. Contractual view of power, because contract makes constitution. Constitution will be source of power for state, and effectively it will be people. People are source of power because they have made the contract, right? So you will find you will find in liberal democracies, in constitutional states, power lies with state. Power lies with state. This was liberal view on source of power, right? The second view, of course, will come from Marxist view on source of power, also known as structural view. Why structural view? Because what will Marxists say? Who has power? Superstructure, basic structure. Who has power according to Marx? I am talking about Marx himself. Who has power according to Marx? Basic structure, right? Then Gramsci and Lukács, they will say both superstructure and basic structure have power because influence is bidirectional. As simple as that, right? So in Marxist view, which is also known as structural view, who is source of power? It is structures. Structures have power in Marxist view. It is structuralist view on power, right? The class which owns or dominates a structure has power. Who has power? The class which owns or dominates a structure has power, right? So this is what Marxist view is. Who has power? For Marx, basic structure has power. For Gramsci and Lukács, who will have power? It is both basic structure and superstructure. The people who are dominating basic structure and superstructure have power. But what is the source of power? Structures themselves. What is the source of power? Structures themselves. Then the third the third source of power, as seen by scholars of political science, is idea. Idea as source of power. Idea as source of power, in which we'll see Gramsci, right? Gramsci. Gramsci will say that Gramsci will say that hegemony or ideas produced by civil society has power, right? Idea produced by civil society will establish its hegemony on you. When it establishes its hegemony on you, idea becomes a source of power. Then we have also seen Althusser. Althusser. We have seen his ideological state apparatus, concept of interpellation, ideological state apparatus, and concept of interpellation. What is the view of Althusser? He says that ideological state apparatus, church, school will control you, right? By limiting you within the ideas which has been feeded to you. So again, idea becomes a source of power. You are interpellated. You are interpellated to be someone because such ideas are feeded to you. Then there is also Foucault, right? Foucault says this one thing, one beautiful thing, that knowledge is power. Again, very simple to understand that knowledge is power, idea is power. But this says in negative sense, right? Whereby he will say that knowledge limits your mental horizons and knowledge limits your thinking. Such knowledge which essentialize you will be limiting you. It is in negative connotation, right? He says that you are a product of discourses. What are these discourses? These are basically ideas. These are basically ideas, right? These are basically ideas. So we have seen two things, that who has power, then what is the source of power, right? In who has power, we have seen either humans have power in individual or in collective, or structures have power, superstructure, basic structure, or patriarchal basic structure. Then what is source of power? It is either people, constitutions, or structures, or idea, right? The next thing that we are going to see now is strategy of power. What is strategy of power? Is how to use power, how to exercise power. What is strategy of power? It is how to exercise of power. It is basically planning of power, right? Again, three point of view will be there. What will liberals say? Liberals will say that whatever is allowed to do by allowed to do by constitution, that is power. So liberals will say, what will liberals say? Liberals will say that power is exercise of law. Power is exercise of law. Power is exercise of constitutions. This is what liberals will say. Then Marxist will say another thing. What will Marxist say? They will say power is coercion. Power is coercion. Then there is Foucault. Then there is Foucault. What Foucault will say? Right? Foucault will say that power is strategy in itself. How power is strategy in itself? Because power is used like a strategy. Power is exercised like a strategy. Right? Constantly you are trying to be limited. You as a person are trying to be limited. You as a person are trying to government or society is trying to develop a governmentality within you, right? Then biopolitics is continuously applied on you, right? And biopower is also there. So power is a strategy in itself. What is strategy of power, right? How to use power? In exercise of understanding how to use power, liberals say that power is exercise of law, power is exercise of constitution. Marxist will say power is due to coercion. Foucault will say power is strategy in itself, right? You are being continuously exposed to power. It is continuously exercised on you within institution, within knowledge systems, within everything that is shown to you. There is some aspect of power. Power is strategy in itself, right? Now the three things we have seen: who has power, what is the source of power, and what is the strategy of power, that is how to use power. The next thing will be what is purpose of power, right? What is purpose of power? So the first person to talk about purpose of power, not first person, but the first point of view is as by Robert Dahl, right? What Robert Dahl says about power, right? He sees power in controlling sense, power as controlling, and for him, power is extractive power. What does he mean by that? Right? If A has a power on B, this means that even if B does not want to do something, A will get things done by B. This is extractive power, this is controlling power, right? Even if A, even if B does not want to do something, right? A has power on B. If A is able to get things done even against wishes of B, even if B does not want to do something and A is coercing B to get something done, it is extractive power and it is power of A over B. This is extractive power. The second, the second view, or this view is also known as utilitarian view, because power has utility. Power has utility. And this view is also vertical view of power, right? This is hierarchical view of power, right? There is this hierarchy of people. A is above B. Whatever A say, B will have to do it. Hierarchical view of power, utilitarian view of power, extractive view of power, controlling view of power, right? Even if B does not want to do something, A will be able to get it done. Hierarchical or vertical view of power, as said by Robert Dahl. The second view on purpose of power is by Gandhi or Hannah Arendt. What does Gandhi and Hannah Arendt talks about power? Right? Power for Gandhi and Hannah Arendt is not to control, but it is to empower. If you have power, you will empower other people to do better in this life, in their life. If Robert Dahl's view is controlling, that is power on. I have power on you. This is controlling thing, right? And I am giving power to you. This is empowering thing. So for Gandhi and Hannah Arendt, power was power to empower, power to do something, not power on someone. Power on someone, it is extractive as given by Robert Dahl, and power to is power to do something as given by Hannah Arendt and Gandhi. Right? Then the third view of what is the purpose of power, it is given by Foucault. Right? What does Foucault will say? What is the purpose of power? It is identity creation. It is governmentality. What is governmentality? That you are governing yourself. For economy of power. For economy of power means the cost of exercising power should be less. Right? Then we have seen his concept of normalization, homogenization. Right? All these concepts we have seen. Right? Then he says biopolitics on micro level and governmentality on macro level. Right? What is the purpose of power? For Foucault, it is identity creation. It is controlling someone through ideas. For economic power, for normalization, for biopolitics, for governmentality. Right? This is purpose of power as said by uh, Dahl, Gandhi, Arendt, and Foucault. What is purpose of power? Power to control, power to do something, and power to control through identity creation. These are all three views. Power to control, that is extractive view of power. Power on someone, that is extractive view of power. Controlling someone, that is extractive view of power, as given by Robert Dahl. Then we have seen developmental view of power as explained by Arendt and Gandhi, who say that power is to empower other. Power is power to empower, power to do something, and it is a horizontal view of power, not vertical view of power. It is horizontal, right? It is horizontal view of power, whereby if you have power, you will give power to B, and B will give power to C, right? Horizontal view of power, or it is also called as moralist view on power. This is purpose of power as explained by Dahl, Gandhi, Arendt, and Foucault. Then the last concept in concept of power of political science is this concept. It is it is categorization of power, categorization or definition of power as given by Stephen Lukes in his book Power, a Radical View. In his book Power, a Radical View, Stephen Lukes has given concept of three phases of power, whereby he will say there are three phases of power. First phase is power as domination. Second phase is power as agenda setting, and the third phase is power as thought control process. Thought control process. Very simple, very simple. Not really hard to understand. What is power as domination? What is power as domination? That you are dominating someone, yeah, that you have power over someone, right? You have power to make decisions. This is decision making power. Power as domination is power to make decision making power, right? The second phase, as explained by Stephen Lukes, is power of agenda setting. This concept was first given by Peter Backrack and Morton Baraz. They says that before decision making, before decision making, there is agenda which comes, right? On which things decision has to be made. That is agenda. If you are controlling agenda, then you are controlling decision themselves, because you are limiting the factors, you are limiting the dimensions on which decision has to be made. So what is more important in terms of controlling? It is power as agenda setting, and this power is bigger than power of domination, power of decision making, right? Decision making power, power as domination, was explained in elitist theory of power by Duhl and pluralist theory of power by Mills, CW Mills, right? Then third phase of power is power as thought control process, right? We have seen power as thought control process in hegemony, in interpellation, and in sociological view of power, knowledge power connection, whereby hegemony, ideology, knowledge power connection, grand narratives, meta narratives try to control try to control you as a person. So what becomes more important is this: if you are controlling someone's thought process, agenda will be shaped by that. If you are controlling someone's thought process, decisions will be also taken on the basis of thought process. So what is the most important power? It is power as thought control process, because both agenda setting, both decision making is done on the basis of thought control process, right? The next concept the next concept that we are going to do, and the next concept which was asked in UPSC PYQ, was the concept of basis of power. Basis of power. This is essentially a theory of sociology. This is not the theory of political science, but UPSC has asked question on it, whereby basis of power were given by John French and Bertram Raven. They have talked about social influence, how social influence is, right? What is social influence? That me as a person is influencing you to change your decisions, to change your beliefs, to change your attitude, right? And if I am able to do that, if I have enough power to do that, then I have power, right? Then I have power, then I have social power, right? What is social influence? What is social influence? Social influence is that a person A can change beliefs, attitudes, behavior of values of person B, right? This is social influence. And if A is able to do such thing, then A has social power, or extent of such power, potential of A influencing B is social power, right? This is social influence and this is social power. And in explaining social power, Bertram Raven and John French have given five bases of power. First is legitimate, second is reward, reward. Third is referent, fourth is expert, fifth is coercive power, and sixth, which has came very recently, is informational power. Right? These are five bases of power because sixth has come very recently. Right? And how this categorization has happened on the basis of how social changes are implemented, how much these social changes are permanent. Right? There has been a PYQ on basis of power. That is why I am explaining it like this. What is social influence and what is social power, and what is basis of power as given by French and Raven. Legitimate base of power. What is legitimate base of power? Right? What is legitimate base of power? That a person has formal right to exercise power. Right? Example will be a CM exercising power in his state, or a DM, district magistrate, saying that district magistrate saying that the floods are too much or pollution is too much, schools of the area will be closed. This is legitimate exercise of power, right? This is legitimate exercise of power, that I have formal right to make others do something. I have formal right of make others do something. Then reward power. What is reward power? It is basically it is basically A will say to B that do something for me. I will pay you X amount, or I will give you some food or something like that. And if B does A's work, then A has reward power on B, whereby you do something for others in order to get compensation for it. Then there is referent power. Referent power, reference or reverence is attractiveness or worthiness, right? You will see babas, you will see church fathers, you will see even people from your family, your father, your big brother, your big sister, your mother have a lot of power on over you, in the sense that if they say something to you, you put enough worth in them to do things as they want. This is referent power, right? Because you find someone attractive, you find someone worthy, that is why you do those things for them. This is referent power. Example will be uh, a pandit, a maulvi, right? Or a pastor, or father, or big brother, or big sister, because you look up to them. This is referent power. Then there is expert power, right? You are going to a class, there you find mentor, right? You consider that mentor to be expert, and you consider that mentor that he will guide you and make your preparation easy, right? He'll guide you and make your preparation easy. You follow that person's advice because he has expertise in something, right? Let's assume you are into an accident and you have been the perpetrator, where you have basically caused the accident, and you go to lawyer. Why do you go to lawyer? Because that lawyer has a skill or knowledge. So this is expert base of power. Then there is again coercive ways of power, whereby you do things because you feel punishment, you fear punishment. Why people do ITR? Why people do ITR or pay taxes? Because uh, they are fearful if they are non-compliant with paying taxes, punishment can occur to them. And the sixth and the latest basis of power which has came into being is informational power, right? Ability to control info, right? How much you know or how much you don't know, that is informational power. That is informational base of power, right? That is informational base of power. Okay. One or two more concepts are remaining. Like developmental power is remaining. We will see developmental power when we are going to see democracy and C.B. Macpherson and his book of democratic theory, Essays in Retrieval. When we see that in democracy, we'll see developmental view on power, right? Because his view on democracy and his view on power are very much aligned to each other. So that we will see there, right? The last concept in pursuit of understanding power is Weberian. Max Weber's what who was Weber? It is Max Weber's stratification or categorization of power. Max Weber's categorization of power, whereby what will Weber say? That if if you have status, if you have status, then you have social power. If you have class, then you have economic power. Right? If you belong to dominant class, you are you are you have economic power. And if you belong to a ruling party, then you have political power. This is Weberian categorization of power in status, class, and party, social power, economic power, and political power. In his book, In Protestant Ethics and Spirit of Capitalism. Right? So, this was power. Some concept, some theories of power are remaining. Theories like developmental power, as explained by Macpherson, and elitist theory of power and pluralist theory of power we are going to see in concept of democracy, because they are more more helpful to understand democracy there. So why? Because both all of this theory, that like pluralist theory and elitist theory, will say that power lies with individual, right? If power lies with individual, then it is a democratic theory. Why developmental power? Because if you have power in a democracy, what you do for that? You do that, you use that power to do good for others, right? So this was power. I hope you understood power. I tried to explain you in quite a detail. In I hope you understood of all concept, like three phases of power, then basis of power, then who has power, source of power, how to use power, what is strategy of power, all those things. I hope you understood all of that. And from the next lecture, I will see and I'll start with legitimacy and how legitimacy, authority, and power are interconnected. This we are going to see from the next lecture. I hope this lecture helped. I'll see you